Hi everyone, welcome back to the Relax and Craft YouTube channel. My name's Fleur and today we're going to go through how to make a beaded necklace and what findings you're going to need, what tools you're going to need, and also if you've broken a necklace, how you can repair it. So we've all been there, we've all broken our favourite necklace or bracelet, or the clasp has broken or it's broke the string, and it just goes in the drawer, and one day you say, I'm going to fix it. Well, let me show you just how easy it is to fix or to make a beaded bracelet or necklace. So there's a few things that we're going to need. The first thing we're going to need is some tiger tail or beading thread. So this is a nylon coated stainless steel wire, and this is quite flexible. You can see it's really flexible. This is in a white colour. They do come in lots of different colours, and this is a 0.38 diameter cord. So it's a really nice fine cord, and it will go through most of your beads that you have in your stash, or if you're buying beads, it will go through most of those ones. It's a really lovely threading material. We're going to need some findings, so I'm just going to bring my findings box across. We're going to definitely need a new clasp. So we're going to take our clasps. We're going to need a jump ring, because a jump ring jumps the gap between what we're beading and the clasp, hence the name jump rings. We're going to need some crimps and some crimp covers. So we're going to use the crimp covers in this one. I will do another video on different kinds of findings and different kinds of endings for your necklace and bracelet, but this is what we're going to use today. This is what a lot of people have in their stash already, so they will have sort of like your crimp covers and your crimps. That tends to be kind of like a standard jewellery making staple, but in another video I'll show you how to use things like culottes and things like that. So let's just move that out the side. So we've got our little elements here. Now for a more professional and a more finished look, I like to use French wire as well. So this is a 0.7 French wire. If you don't know what French wire is, it's like a little coil of wire, okay? So it comes in like a long piece like so, and then I tend to just go and cut it all up just so I can use it. You only need typically just under 1 centimetre for each end. So you can see this is going to go a long way. So I like that as it gives a really nice finish to your pieces. And like I say, a more professional look rather than the beading thread. So that's what we're going to need findings wise. Tool wise, if I bring my toolkit over, what we're going to need is we're definitely going to need some sort of flat nose plier. So either your bent nose, chain nose, or your flat nose, whichever ones you have. I'm going to take my bent nose. We're going to need some cutters. Let's just move those out of the way. We're definitely going to need some cutters, so let's take our cutters. And then for another tool, which you may have or you may not have, we're going to use some crimping pliers. Now these are going to be like the key to making your pieces really nice and professionally finished. If you don't have crimping pliers, you can get around it with your chain nose or your bent nose pliers, but these are going to really up your game. So I'm going to get ready, and I'm going to get some beads out, and I'm going to start to thread up a necklace or a bracelet. I haven't decided yet, and I'll meet you back here when I've got that. So I decided on making a necklace. So I've gone ahead and I've used all my little odds and ends beads. So I've got a little pot that I keep all the sort of like the beads that are like left over from projects, or little like odd ones that I found on my desk, and I've used all those to make this really beautiful necklace. It's got loads of different colours in it, so it's going to go with everything that you wear. It's a really lovely way of using up all your little odds and ends of beads, all your ones that you've got left over in your bead boxes. So I've threaded that all onto my beading thread. So you can see there my beading thread has gone through all of those beads, and I've just made it so I've left quite a little bit longer than what I need. Now I'm just going to place down a beading mat so you'll be able to see the white of the beading thread a little bit easier. That's better. So I'm used a bead stopper just to stop everything falling off. These are really great. So what they are is like little boingy springs, and you just squeeze the little ears together and it opens up and then it just holds it nice and tight. But it just means that if you want to bead up lots of different pieces and then like go and put the clasps on at the end, this is going to save all your beads falling off of your beading thread. So let's just take that off. Now I have used really long ends on this. It's just so I can show you demo properly what we're going to do. So you probably wouldn't leave this much, and if you're going straight from the reel, then obviously you would use even less. But the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to trim down these just two ends because they're quite raggedy. I don't want them sort of like bent or looking a bit ropey on the ends. I want them nice and clean. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to place on my bead stopper just on one end, just so when I'm working on this one nothing falls off this end, so I can move that end out of the way. Now I've got all my elements here that I need. So I've got my 2 pieces of French wire, my crimp covers and my crimps, and my lobster claw and 2 jump rings. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to take, I'm just going to move those out of the way. I'm going to take one of my crimps. Now the crimps that I use are 2mm round crimps. If I just bring that as close as I can to the camera, let me see, where have you gone? There you are. So what these are is they're like very fine thin tubes, little beads, which are 2mm in diameter, and they're designed to squash and hold your beading thread in place. So I like to use the beads rather than the tubes because I find I get a neater finish. So this little guy here is the key to holding everything together. So make sure that you get like really nice quality crimps when you're buying them, because like I say, if this fails, everything's going to fall apart. So it's this that holds everything together. The rest is what we sort of like use to fasten and just to make look pretty. So the first thing is we're going to place that onto our beading thread. So you can see it goes on there really well, and eventually we're going to place our beading thread back through this bead as well. But to start with, we're just going to add that on to the end of our beading thread. We're then going to take a little bit of French wire. Now, like I said before, the French wire is just little tiny coils of very fine wire. And what this is going to do is it's going to protect the beading thread from the wear and tear of a finding, and also it's going to stop your beading thread falling out through the gap in your jump ring if you've not closed your jump ring properly, and it's going to give it that really nice aesthetic professional look. So what we're going to do is we're going to place this onto our beading thread now. So let's just place that on. So let's have a look at what we've got so far. We can get the camera to focus. We're focusing on everything else other than what we want to focus on. There we go. So you can see I've got my beading, my crimp bead, my French wire onto my beading thread. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to actually place on our clasp onto our beading thread. Now you can go straight onto the clasp via the little hole at the bottom, so the loop at the bottom. You could go straight onto that if you so wished. The problem with that is the clasp then becomes an integral part of the necklace or the bracelet, whatever you're wearing, whatever you're making, sorry. If you want to say change your clasp, or somebody doesn't like your clasp, or your beading thread breaks and your clasp falls off, you have to restring the whole necklace to be able to change the clasp. Whereas if you go to a jump ring, what a jump ring is it's a little circle of metal with a cut at the top, and this is going to jump the gap from our beading thread to our finding. Okay, so if we needed to, we could change this out, because we can open and close this and change our finding or change our jump ring if we needed to. So I think you're better off always going on to a jump ring where you can, rather than straight onto the clasp. And I'm just going to use my other pair of, these are my 4-in-1 crimping pliers, but they have got flat noses at the top, so I'm just going to open that jump ring up and I'm going to place on the clasp. So in effect, all I've done is I've made the little beaded loop at the bottom bigger and openable by using a jump ring, and I'm just going to close that up. Now if you have got another pair of chain nose or flat nose pliers, obviously use that for your jump ring. Never use your round nose pliers to open and close a jump ring, because you'll slip off of it. You won't be able to hold it very still. If you don't have another pair of chain nose or round nose, you can place it into the bottom of your pliers, your round nose pliers. It's just very difficult to hold it still with your round nose pliers and get a really good, you can see it just slips off quite easily because they're conical, whereas the only thing that you've got is that tiny little box joint at the bottom. You could just place it in there while you open and close your jump ring, but that's only good really for just like a single jump ring. You wouldn't want to do that with multiple jump rings. So I've got my clasp onto my jump ring and I'm going to go through my little jump ring. So now if I just bring everything back up to show you, now the crimp bead obviously will go over the top of the French wire, but don't worry about that. So we've got, move the pliers, we've got again our crimp, our French wire, and now our jump ring with our clasp attached. We're now going to take the end of our beading thread and we're going to go back through the crimp bead. Okay, so ignore everything else. We're just going to go back through that crimp bead. And so you can see that we've made a little loop with our French wire and our jump ring enclosed in there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to tighten the loop. So if I just zoom in, if you just keep an eye on what's going to happen to the French wire. Ooh, you get out of the way, clasp. Okay, so you can see I'm pulling that little tail end down, and what's going to happen is the French wire will start to bend around and it's now encapsulated the jump ring onto the French wire. So we've now got a really nice neat finish to our piece. We've got enough room for our jump ring to move around, so it's not going to be a static piece, it's going to be able to move nicely. We've got our beading thread protected by our French wire, and we've got our crimp bead. So now what we need to do is we need to crimp or squish this little bead shut. Now I'm going to use my crimping pliers. If you don't have crimping pliers, you can use your flat nose or your chain nose pliers. The problem with that is it's just going to squish it flat and not make it into a bead again. So I'm going to show you how crimping pliers work. So can you see here we've got this little tooth at the bottom. So these are called 4-in-1 crimping pliers, and what they do is they've got different stations up here for the different sizes of crimps. But the first one that we're going to do is we're going to use this tooth here and this indent on the opposite side to squish our crimp bead close and put a crease in it down the middle. So I'm just going to take it right back to that tooth. Now can you see there that it's right on the tooth? And all I'm going to do is give it a squeeze. And by squeezing that, let me see how close I can get it. You should be able to see that it's crimped, my crimp bead really closed, and I can give that a pull and nothing's going anywhere, and I've got a little crease down the middle. Okay, so if you were going to use your flat nose pliers, this is what you would be left with. So you'd be left with it flat like this, and squashed. But what we're going to do now is we're going to go on to the second stage of using our crimping pliers, and I'm going to just place it in to about the second little notch at the top. So when I close them, can you see these 3 gauges of sort of like hole in there? So I'm just going to go in and I'm just going to start to squeeze on that last hole, and I'm just going to make this bead into, so you can see I just squished it closed and it's now gone into a smaller bead, and that again is really closed on there. Let's get as close as I can for you. So where it put the little crease in the middle, by giving it another squeeze, it's now made it into a bead. Okay, so you can see that nicely like so. So now what we need to do is we need to trim away the end of our beading thread. So this tail end, which we're not going to use, we can trim that away. And I like to put a bend in the wire. Don't forget there's a little piece of wire inside here, it's just covered in the nylon. I like to put a bend in the wire so it's now on a right angle. And then taking my cutters, I can then cut only that one. Obviously we don't want to cut this one is attached to our necklace, so we're just going to trim that little end away. So now we have the clasp attached to our necklace, but it's still looking a little bit ropey, it's still a little bit sharp and scratchy where that end is. So what we're going to do now is we're going to cover that end with a crimp bead cover. So crimp bead cover is, if you're from the 80s you will know who Pac-Man is, but it's basically a little half bead which is going to then close around our crimp to make it look like a 3mm bead. Now these crimps do come in different sizes. This is a 3mm one. If you've got sort of like a 3mm crimp, I would go up to a 4mm crimp cover. So I always tend to use like the one up from the crimp size that I'm using. And what's going to happen is this is going to just sit over the top of that crimp. So you can see inside that little bead now, my crimp is sitting inside there, and all I need to do now is close my crimp cover around this end to then create a bead effect and covering all of my mechanics inside it. So I like to use my crimping pliers to do this. And what I want to do is I'm just going to start to close it down. Now these can be a little bit fiddly to get in place, and they can also be a little bit fiddly to get them looking nice and neat. But what I would suggest is just do tiny little movements. So not big movements, just tiny little closing movements. So I'm closing the bottom and then I'm rocking to the top, and then I'm going and closing the top section down a little bit more until you've got your nice bead shape. Now you can use this back hole of the beading thread, not the tooth, the back large hole, to keep a round form around your crimp so it doesn't squash at your crimp cover, so it doesn't squash completely flat. And all you're going to do is just keep nibbling around it until it's completely closed. Like I say, try not to do it all in one go. So there you can see it is completely covered and closed off. So when we put all of our beads up to the top now, we can see that we've got a really nice finish to the end of our necklace. So what we're going to do now is we're going to repeat the same on the other end. So if I just bring the other end up, I'm going to just make sure that all the beads are really close together. There's no gaps in my beading thread at all. So you can see that there's no gaps there, really nice and close. And then I'm going to repeat on this side. So the first thing I need to add on is my crimp. So let's just pop the crimp bead on. And then we're going to take our French wire and we're going to place our French wire on. Now a little handy tip is to cut both of your French wires before you start, because if they're different lengths you're going to get different size loops. So they must be the same length to get the same size loop at the end of your necklace. And that again is just that nice aesthetic to a piece that gives it that nice professional look. So I'm going to place on my beading French wire, and then because we don't need a clasp on the other side, we just need a jump ring. I'm just going to take a jump ring and I'm going to give that a quick close. Just take it off camera while I close that up, making sure that it's nicely closed. So I've now got my closed jump ring, and this is going to attach into my clasp. So closed jump ring on, and again just isolate that crimp bead. They do like to spin around a little bit, so just get hold of the crimp bead, place it through, and then this time I'm just going to keep hold of the jump ring, because what I want to do is I want to bring the majority of the sort of like tail end through. I don't want to make sure that there's any gaps in there. So when I pull that nice and tight, what I want to make sure now is if I just hold the jump ring, now make sure you don't hold on to the French wire, because obviously that is quite delicate. Let me get hold of that jump ring. So I'm just going to hold of the jump ring, and I'm just making sure that everything is nice and tight and that I've got no gaps in any of my beading thread. So just really make sure that it's like where you want it to be. Obviously we have to get a crimp cover on that gap as well, so if there's a teeny tiny little sort of like gap, that's not a problem. It's just if we have a big gap in our beading, that can be a bit of an issue. So I'm just making sure that everything looks nice and neat, and just giving that a final pull down so that it's all nice and together. And I'm just giving it a little wiggle just to create a tiny little space for my crimp cover at the end, because we don't want to squeeze our crimp cover on and then damage any of our beautiful beads. And I'm just crimping down that crimp now. So again, crimped it down, and then using the top station just to close that up, close my crimp nice and tight. I can then cut away, and again bending it out of the way because I really don't want my cutters anywhere near the thread that's going through the necklace. So cut that away, and then our final piece is to add on our crimp cover. So just place our crimp cover over the top. Now these can be little tricky little suckers. We've got that in place now, and then I'm just going to go ahead with my crimping pliers and just start to close that gap, making sure that like I say, I go from side to side, so I'm not just pushing on one side more, and making sure that it's nice and together. And then all that's left to do is attach, and there we have our necklace completed with our lovely finishes with our French wire, our beading thread going through. It's really super strong, really beautiful, really flexible. I'm just going to zoom out just a little bit just so you can see it all. And you can see there how that is a really nice finish to your piece. Now, just a handy tip if you are making pieces of jewellery at a specific size, just bear in mind how long your finding is. So if you want to make an 18-inch necklace, you're actually only making just under 17 inches because we've got over an inch here of finding. So just keep that in mind when you are making your pieces. If you want them a specific size, just measure how long your finding gap is, if you like. I mean, this is about 1.5 inches long, so I would make a 16.5 inch necklace with 1.5 inches. That will make my true 18-inch necklace. So I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial on how to make a little beaded necklace. Like I say, in future tutorials I will be showing you different ways to end your necklaces and your bracelets, and with different kinds of findings. But like I say, we're starting with this one as a lot of people have got this already in their stash. So thanks ever so much for watching. If you have enjoyed this video and you would like to learn more on jewellery making, please hit that notification button and subscribe to the channel. And also, if you have liked it, please give it a little thumbs up or a comment. It really does mean the world to me. Thanks ever so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next Relax and Craft tutorial.